Before we get into today's video, I want to announce that there is a free Crush Live Poker podcast available on all the major podcast platforms. Just head over to a place like Apple's Podcasts or Spotify and search for free Crush Live Poker podcast, and you will get to hear best of parts of the subscription podcast that we put out on a weekly basis over on crushlivepoker.com. And do me a favor, if you do like this podcast, give it a rating and maybe even write a review. It would be a big, big help.
With Jack of clubs, 10 of clubs.
Okay.
And in this hand, there's a $6 straddle on.
Okay.
And basically, because they just started this game, this is more or less a 1-2 table with more money on it. These players are all very awful, and it's amazing. Mm-hmm. For example, two of the guys that are in this hand, like the villains of the hand, the big blind and the straddle, they're cold calling 3-bets with hands like King 7 suited and King 10 off out of the blind.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is $6 straddle is on and middle position limps.
Okay.
And it folds to me on the button, and I ISO to $25.
Okay.
A tight passive old guy in small blind calls.
Okay.
And then I would call him a whale. Big blind raises to $60.
So one limp to 6, you make it 25 on the button. The small blind calls. The big blind raises to 60, kind of small. Okay.
Very small.
Yep.
Then super loose straddle, he calls, cold calls.
Okay.
Middle position calls.
The initial limper, right?
The limper.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I call.
Okay.
And then the small blind folds.
Small blind folds. He calls your 25 and then now he folds.
Yeah.
Now this is a spot where, again, the whole thing is like, there's so much dead money out there when you say the big blind is sort of a whale, even still, although you might get into stack depth problems, like I kind of want to 4-bet this because there's so much dead money out there. Now, if you're going to say that he's just never, ever going to fold here, if you make it like 250, you do get into some weird stack sizes, but I mean, you've got this dead straddler call, the limper calls, you have the small blind in there. It's just a big, big overlay. It just doesn't seem all that strong from the big blind. With that being said, I do sort of understand sometimes too the flow, I would say, a little bit of the game sometimes, where you want to get these guys post flop. You've got Jack 10 suited. It's just something to keep in mind. So it's 4 ways, is that right?
Yeah. So
okay.
So the pot is $265 4 ways.
Okay. All
and right. The flop comes Jack of spades, 9 of clubs,
yep,
4 of diamonds.
All right, so you flop top pair, you've got a backdoor club draw, right, with Jack 10 of clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So the big blind now checks, and then the straddle bets half pot. He bets $130.
The guy that called, right? Initially, he just called, right?
Yeah, the guy that cold called the small 3-bet.
130, is that right?
$130, yep. Half pot.
130, okay, yep.
Middle position folds.
Okay, the limper folds, yep.
Yep. I just call.
Okay.
And then the small blind calls.
You mean the big blind, right?
Sorry, big blind, yeah.
Okay, big blind calls. So the big blind, who's the guy who 3-bets, it's kind of weird, right? He 3-bets. Yeah. You're calling him a whale, so it's probably not an overpair, right? You block like top set. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it's like ace king. You know what I mean? He's overcalling with like ace king here if you're saying that he's a whale. Mm-hmm. But these are fun hands because it takes me back, like I said, to the mid-teens, the mid-20 teens, and when I was playing at Commerce. And I fully acknowledge that there are many training sites and many competitors of mine out there that might do some of the computer modeling and some of the theory work a little bit better than me, but I will challenge anyone in this spot here against these types of players in terms of giving the best advice for a live hand. So this is obviously a fun one. We've got this whale in the big blind, probably overcalling with 2 overcards, right? You've got top pair and a backdoor flush draw. straddle his leading out here for 130. You could be in kicker trouble, but you do have some backdoors and things like that. So 130 fold call 390 here on the flop. So it looks like the pot is 655.
655.
Yeah, 655.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's go to the turn. Yep.
Turn is the ace of clubs.
Turn's the ace of clubs. Okay, interesting. Yep.
And surprisingly now, both of the big blind and the shuttle, they check.
You know, it's interesting because when you sent this one in, for whatever reason, maybe I slightly misread it. I thought that the whale had c-bet the flop and now checked the turn. And I was like, oh, well, he probably doesn't have an ace because not a lot of whales aren't going to do that. But this is the guy that I just said maybe he's got like ace king or something like that because he overcalled on the flop. But so the turn's the ace of clubs. You pick up basically a flush draw now with a jack. And they both check to you. The pot's 655. You have what, 600? No, excuse me. You've got 800 left about effective with these two guys. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically 810.
Well, that overcall here from this guy, this whale in the big blind. Here's my thought process. The only reason why I think I'd probably take my equity here. I think I would take my equity here and check it back. I don't know if the only reason why you would bet here is to get the straddle off of like king jack or queen jack or something like that. It might be a little bit optimistic here with these stack sizes that you're going to get through both guys. So I think I very well might just take my equity here. I mean, the worst thing in the world is to get jammed on here by the whale if you bet on turn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, the other types of hands that this guy might have from the whale might be like tens, but you block that, right? So it's interesting because there might be a fair amount of this like weirdly overfloated ace X. So I think that I would probably take my equity here when it gets checked to me. What did you do?
Yeah, I checked. I didn't want to get.
So here checks it back. Yep. All right. Let's go to the river.
So going to the river, pot still 655.
Yep.
And it's the king of hearts.
King of hearts. So you miss, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And they both fairly quickly check.
So the big blind checks. The straddle checks. And it is over to you. This one's really, really interesting because you can credibly represent queen 10. And as I look back, because I remember I was telling you this in the email, when I look back on the flop, it's great that there's no front door here. Why do you think that it's great that there's no... If we're thinking about bluffing, why is it great that there's no front door here?
I think especially like villains think that, when the front door flush misses, like, and people bet, they just think you assume you missed the flush draw and have to bluff now.
Right. And so with no front door, what is the obvious draw on Jack 9-4 rainbow?
Yeah, queen 10 open ender.
Right. Queen 10 would be the most obvious draw, right? Of course, like you could have 8-10 or something like that. So it would just really suck. And here's the other thing too. I don't know if the whale here is checking. I don't think the whale's ever checking ace king if he ran into it. The straddle guy, I mean, I guess he could have king jack some of the time here. You lose to like a queen jack type of hand. I think it's going to be probably very, very rare that anyone has two pair here. And for that reason, I think it's probably close, but I think that your hand probably plays best as a bluff here if you can just get all one pairs to fold. But again, it's so much different than the texture being a front door. I don't think I would do this with a front door texture. I think sometimes you actually might have the best hand here, but probably it's better to play this as a bluff. It would just suck if like the whale has like ace 5, and I don't know how whaley the guy is, but I mean, it would take a hell of a whale here to like call this river with like ace 5 of spades, like some sort of backdoor like ace X, right? Because again, there's no front door. And queen 10 gets there. And I think you get the straddle off of a lot. So I say go for it. Pot 655, you have like 800 left, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I might just I might just move all in, to be honest with you, because I think that they all have they probably have a lot of mediocre. I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes like betting pot can sometimes be, or 5 or 600 here might even be a little bit more scary than all in. This is again, sometimes where the theory, you might want to just break from theory a little bit instead of trying to represent being polarized to give somebody a worse price. The idea is to move all in. Sometimes you'll actually get called more frequently because they'd be like, why would this guy bet like this? But I say go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Both of these guys, if they would have had a good hand after the turn check through, like even if they had, I think a good ace, like ace king, ace queen, and they like turn 2 pair or whatever, I think they both would bet. So, and after the whale calls in the turn, I agree with you. I just never think my jack's good very often. So because I blocked queen 10 and I ripped it. And just was hoping to fold out, weak ace X.
Yeah.
Maybe even like a hand like king 10 or something, that called with the gutter or something out of small blind.
Well, yeah, I mean, those hands, king 10 should fold, right? Queen jack should fold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again,
Yep.
it's just that whales will usually play imbalanced here where they'll bet off with like aces up. So I think that most of the time, if you can dismiss 2 pair from anybody's holdings, I think this is probably going to be played better as a bluff. What happened?
The whale in the big blind, he folded.
Okay.
And then the straddle tanked for what seemed like ages.
Mm-hmm.
I pretty much never call clock when I have it and when I don't have it.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away anything, So I just probably sit there pretty stoic, and he just took forever and just kept talking to himself out loud. Like, would I ever do this if I didn't have the stone nut?
So you didn't tell me. So you didn't tell me. I don't know the result of this hand. Let me try to put this together. Did he tank call with king jack? Oh, okay. What did happen?
Nope. No, he just keeps talking to himself like, would I ever? Because I've been pretty tight but very aggressive the whole time, and didn't make any crazy bluffs or anything. And he just was like, would I ever do this if I didn't have the stone nuts? And eventually he just said, no, I don't think you do this if you don't have anything but the nuts, and called.
He said, I don't think you would do this. He said, I don't think you would do this with anything but the nuts, and called.
No, he said he doesn't think I would do this if I had the nuts.
Oh, if you had the nuts. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, he thinks I would. Yeah, he thinks I would bet smaller, like to get called.
Okay, so what happened? So he called. What did he have?
He had ace 10 off.
Wow. So he started
Yeah.
this was what I thought that the whale would have here. No, I'm serious, because the whale was the one that raised pre, right? The 3-bet pre, right?
Yes, and this guy cold called a 3-bet with ace 10 in the
And then
straddle.
he started to bet on the flop, and he check over calls the turn, and now he calls at the end. I mean, I guess he blocks like a 10, but I don't. He also blocks the other draw, which is 8-10 that misses, right? So that's, I don't know. I mean, that one should have gotten through. I mean, I think this is exactly what you're trying to fold out, right? I mean, you don't check this hand back because you feel like an idiot, when it gets to showdown and somebody has ace 10, but it's actually the straddle that might be another whale, actually, that maybe you haven't actually taken into account. Right.
Yeah, I didn't know he was going to be that sticky. I mean, I'd seen him made obviously some pretty light calls because they're all just complete fish. But for me, the reason why I sent this hand in, I was more or less thinking like, is this too optimistic of me to think that I could get two really bad whales, more or less, to fold here on this river? Or is this, is this still a good play? And most of the time it's going to work. I wasn't really sure.
Well, I mean, it's not that whales, you can sometimes get guys to fold. I just expected the hands to be a little bit different. But yeah, the more guys that are going to hero you and then you put them together in a hand, the less likely it is that it's going to get through, right? I mean, if you've got two guys that are going to call 80% of the time, what are the chances that one of them are going to call? You know what I mean? Like, it's one of these things. So I don't really mind the play, though. I really don't mind the play. I mean, there's people that call all the time that punt. They call this show, right? I mean, you listen to the second caller. No, I don't mind this one at all. I appreciate it. Thanks for the call.